you. I think this program, the TiE ISB Connect, has been growing faster than our economy. Now, just remembering myself, when you look at here, not only the large audience, big screen, and so many sponsors there. The first meeting that we had also around 2000, 2001, we had it in a small conference room in Cyber Towers, and with no sponsors. So that's the beginning of it. And I also want to acknowledge here the person who has always been there on the other side of it, the ISB side of it. Ajit is sitting there. And Ajit has been there all these years as a deputy dean and dean, and he stayed 2 years also after he said, I'm quitting again, continued as a dean. All right. So I'll just first give you a little bit of my 2 cents worth of things. First, one disclaimer, she said that, these are all the billionaires. I'm not a billionaire. So, but I'm not a billionaire, but the companies that I have been associated either as a CEO or the person who has funded, mentored, whatever it is, there are quite a few companies who have become, $1 billion or even multi-million-dollar companies. So I'm certainly very proud of their achievements. If not when I was there after I left. Now we see that few numbers there. There's 3 of them, in 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion. Today we are in the middle of 2017. We're already about 2.5 billion. That means we'll be there at the 3 billion by 2019. Sorry, trillion. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm still lost. I just need to say some little anecdote to why I'm getting confused on this billion and trillion. So most of us, when we left India, I went to US in 1984, that we had only one dream, to make $1 million and come back to India. So I'm still stuck there. So you ask my son now, I asked him the other day, what's your dream? He says, Dad, I want to make $1 billion. So I'm sure somebody here is saying that I want to make $1 trillion. And it's not too far, by the Apple computer's almost there now. It's, I don't know, 500, $600 billion kind of thing. So, sorry? 800. It's only 200 billion away from the trillion. So I'm sure Steve Jobs will see from somewhere. So for us now, at the current growth rate of about 7%, it will take about 5 years to go to add another $1 trillion. It looks nice. It looks like a great opportunity for all of us here and the people outside. But now we say, where do we get it? Just a week ago, when we were talking to the NASSCOM people, the president of NASSCOM said that at peak, the IT industry has recruited 2.5 lakhs people a year, net, or the new additions. Now it has come down to 1.25. Yesterday I met Mohan Reddy Garu. He said, that's also a little overestimate. So this one sector which has driven this economy very well, especially this part of the world, is all mostly 80-90% is all tech driven stuff. Now that is slowing down. So if that is slowing down, where does it happen? The next trillion will happen, but where? There are few areas that I have got some information data. Before that, when we were talking about this TiE ISB Connect, what do we do? So Pradeep Mittal said that we got bored with all these IT guys talking all the time, because the TiE originally was, though it was Indus entrepreneurs, but most of them are from tech industry, and it was a de facto people understood that it's only for tech people, but it's evolved over a period of time into including all. So this time we said that okay, we look at people who are actually building the new India now. So that's all IT. I'm not saying it's all done. It will continue to be, but they are not. Unless something changed, like Raj said, some innovations happen, it will move on a little bit, the checking along kind of thing. The 2 people next to me, Jalaj I have probably known now 3-4 years, and Asian Paints. Most of you think paints, isn't it? These are the guys who built a great company, and in competing with the best companies of that time, ICS, ICI. And there are many other things, I do not know all of them. But today they are the largest. Not only that, they, so many times they get these awards for the best company to work for. So he will share that part of the journey. Now, I'm just left for Mahima thing a little later. And she's from here among us. And the company was founded by her grandfather, the parents built it to some level. But now to take it to the next level, they are leaders in many areas in the world. It's not just in Hyderabad, they're number one, or some Telangana, they're number one, many of them. So she will share those things also. So that's a reflection of where your next trillion is going to come from. And few more things which are not present here, I will just share through a few examples. Now today, we all work hard, do a 60, 70 billion, we say $100 billion software exports, but some of it, we comes back for this, because of the body shopping and all, and it goes back, as paying the salaries and all that. It's maybe net, I don't know exact number, let's say 70 billion or something. All of it we are sending to China today. So the imports from China are about 60, 70 billion dollars today. All of it. We work hard so much, send all of it to China. Now that's where the opportunity is. The opportunity is that if we can do import substitution, and the projections of the Commerce Ministry is that 60 billion will become 200 billion. Mostly electronics, but there are a lot of other products that get into the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not an expert in that, but I do know that this is some broader figures. We import about $10 billion worth of raw material, do a value addition of about 40 billion, export about $50 billion worth of pharmaceuticals, and make about $15 billion of profit out of it. So these are the general numbers for you there. So the import substitution and also the whole industry around the pharma, healthcare, that's going to be, in my mind, very big. In US, it's already 15% of the GDP. This country also, it will go to a larger thing. And we can see the same thing happening here. Every hospital is becoming bigger and bigger. I was told the new hospital that's coming in Gachibowli is 1,000 beds. So that's, you can see the growth of that sector also. Another small example I want to take it to you. There are about in 2014 when the new government came in, they said that we are importing all the cell phones. Every cell phone is imported in this country. And now I don't know what are its total numbers, both smartphones and feature phones, everything together, 500 million. And somewhere in the news reports say that it's about 150 million phones are the smartphones. Everything is imported. Now government changed a small policy saying that why it happened before, that is the reason is that it was cheaper to import than importing the components and manufacturing here. Because the taxes, there were no taxes on the imported product, but there were taxes on the components. And it's a very stupid way of doing business, but that's what it was. They changed that, gave a 10% advantage to the manufacturer in this country. All of a sudden, it's went into 100 million things. There's one factory I have seen in 1 year going up from 0 to 25 million phones being manufactured in one place. They have created 10,000 jobs. That's about 15,000 crores of economy. 150 crores of salaries to women in the age group of 18 to 25. That's all new economy. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. And these things will go, this 15,000 crores is basically, it's only little over 2 billion. Now I'm talking about 200 billion. That's the whole market space there. So it's the electronics and consumers and that whole space, the healthcare space, and now also emerging, because we always had this agriculture is being the drag on it, everything grows at 15%, 10%, 7%, but agriculture goes 2%. So growth rate comes down. But now the new innovations that have happened, Raj, this is something which is actually, I am very proud of. Everywhere in the world, what happens? Coca-Cola makes Coca-Cola. So they make the whole country, addict to the Coca-Cola. You go make the pizza, what is Domino's pizza or something like that. Today, Coca-Cola and Pepsi have a zero growth. Who are growing in this country? Paper boat, raw. The guys who figured it out, the taste of India. It's no longer the black water. Or what was the color, I'm sorry. Color water. So now those are the guys. The growth rate, if you see each of these people, what they are doing it, they're all started by somebody like us here. It's not that the innovation has not come somewhere else there. Ever since these guys came in, the growth rates have. Not only that, now Coca-Cola is scratching their head and say, what do we do? They said that, okay, we can't call them Coke, so we'll call it a different brand name, but we'll make the same things. Now they are copying what has been innovated by these people here. And this is happening now in the food processing. So each of the areas now that the people starting to challenge the existing players. The first 15 years when we created our economy from whatever is $500 billion, when we all started 25 years ago, to 2.5 trillion today, it was all about filling the spaces. We go to America, we see something working there, we come back here, do the thing. You see Uber, you create Ola. I went there, like he said that, I started with my body shopping business, then started doing offshore software services, whatever it is. So many businesses that we see today there were no innovations. We were just trying to get the ideas from there and trying to do our way of doing the business. The next trillion or next trillions after that are not going to come from that. My daughter came to me the other day and said, Dad, you are very lucky. So why is it? When you came back from the US, everything was empty. Not only the real estate around here, even the business space was empty. So you guys had so many opportunities. You could start anything. Even if you are worth a little, a dime, you could make a business work. Today, see my generation, everything is filled. It's so competitive. So how do you think that we go from here to next level? I told her that it's true that we are filling these spaces there, but we were fighting for a small space of 500 billion, whatever. I said, now we are going to fight a space of 10 billion. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Anyway, we'll continue to the dialogue.
Good evening, friends. First of all, when I heard about this theme, I'm reminded of what I've heard for the last 2 years. You want to become a billionaire, you have to solve problems for a billion people. I think that's the definition of what a billionaire is all about. And as you look at the opportunities in the Indian context, as you look at the opportunities in the global context, so whether it's healthcare, what we just heard about, whether it's learning or education, which again offers those kind of opportunities, many other such sectors that exist out there where there are challenges, customers are dissatisfied, customers are looking for solutions. And I think if our organizations concentrate on those challenges, convert them into opportunities, I'm sure there's an opportunity to create many multi-billion dollar organizations and take the Indian economy to a $1 trillion economy. In the next few minutes, very quickly, what I will share with you is the three things that we at Asian Paints hold very dear. If I go back to about 25 years back when I joined the organization, the market cap was less than 1,000 crores. And now after 25 years, it's about 1,10,000 crores. So that's the journey, that's the distance that the organization, working with all its stakeholders, has traveled over the last 25 years. I think what was unique is what I will share with you. First thing is what Srini Raju already alluded to, which was understanding what the customer needs. So if you go back and see what is it that the multinationals had to offer as far as the Indian customer was concerned, in terms of what they will consume, when they will consume, where they will consume, why they will consume. These are insights that you need. These are the things you need to understand and appreciate. Doesn't matter where your customer is in the world. You need to listen to them. You need to articulate to them what is it that your solution is, whether it's a product or a service. And that gives you any sort of an advantage which is extremely difficult to replicate over a period of time. And that is a cycle, if you do it repeatedly, generates tremendous value as far as all stakeholders are concerned. So again, most important is to keep customers at the center. Larger you will become, because many of you are startups and small organizations, medium-sized enterprises. You will become more process-driven. You will become more data-driven. But what is at the essence of everything that you do is to delight the customer. And you need to unclutter your processes and repeatedly go back and remind everybody in the organization there is a customer who pays our salaries and not anybody else. And we need to align all our management processes, all our development processes of products and services to what the customer wants, what the customer is articulating, but sometimes what the customer is not able to articulate, but you are able to appreciate what it is. Second is what we like to call is postponement of gratification. Nothing gets created overnight. I think some of us live for the private equity money that comes in, for the commitments that we make what we call QSQT, which is quarter se quarter tak. So every quarter the performance matters. But it is something a little bit beyond that. So if you are developing a product or a technology, what is it that is unique? What are the building blocks for it? Sometimes it will take you months, sometimes it will take you years to develop these competitive advantages. If you want to have processes, whether it's information technology, whether it's manufacturing processes, whether it's investment in marketing, whether it's investment in customer insight, whether it is sound financial and accounting practices. Some of this will look very painful. Some of this will not show the numbers that you want to see at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter. But if you want to build an organization for 3 years, you want to build an organization for 5 years, you want to build something that's much beyond what you will be here today, then you will take those kind of decisions. And as they say, lambi race ka ghoda. So you got to really figure out what is it that you want to stand for. And that's true about the products and services you offer also. You may feel that you're not getting the best price for the features that you're offering. But if you think this is what you stand for, eventually the customer will discover that you are unique, you're very different than other competitors or organizations in the marketplace. And the third attribute that comes to my mind is the human capital that you have in the organization today, but more importantly, what you want to attract and retain as you go forward. Again, it's very easy to recruit like-minded people, but the customers out there are fast changing. The people who are coming out of universities are fast changing. Technologies are fast changing. So you need to surround yourself with people who are very different than what you are. I'm not saying that the values should be different in terms of how you will conduct business, how you will conduct yourself in a business environment. But outside of that, you need people who will challenge you. You will need people who will tell you how to do things differently. When we started going to management campuses and organization empowered young people to take decisions, that is what allowed them in the front line, whether they were in the labs, whether they were on the shop floors, whether they were at the dealer counters, engaging with customers. They could take decisions in the interest of the organization, and organization could grow at a very good rate, vis-a-vis checking everything back at the headquarters. We have 17 subsidiaries outside of India today. We have 2,000 plus people who work for Asian Paints outside of India. There are only 40, 45 people who are seconded from India. Because there is an implicit belief and faith that it's the local people who need to be empowered in all these countries to build a sustainable business model. So you will find it difficult to go to campuses and recruit the best talent that is out there, because some of them will be different than who you are. But as I always say, you can't drive ahead by looking at the rear view mirror. You got to look ahead. What's the talent? What's the lay of the land out there in the future? And accordingly, if you harness that kind of talent in your organization, then you will build your organization for the future. Because as they always say, what got you here won't get you there. You need to develop skills, you need to take risks, you need to be creative, and maybe these are not the things you did in the past and you got to a certain stage. You got to constantly push the envelope and reinvent yourself. I'll just stop here. I'll just like to thank TiE and ISB for giving this opportunity. I've never been to a TiE event before, so look forward to interacting with some of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jalaj. Please stay here only. We'll have a lot of Q&As after this. Mahima.
Thanks so much for the opportunity of sharing our journey. It's really the first time I've been to such an event as well. And frankly, the only billions I know are the billions of doses of vaccine that we make and supply across many countries in the world. But I'll take that as a cue to be eligible to be part of the panel. So thank you very much. The story of our company actually started 3 generations ago, over 7 decades ago. It was started by 2 visionaries, my grandparents, well ahead of their time. They came from pretty humble beginnings, and they set up the company initially in Vijayawada, town not too far from here, but now made famous by our new state. But they started this company in 1948, and at that time there were a handful of pharma companies really in the country. And in the 60s and 70s, we were pioneers in many fields. We were pioneers in vaccines. We became one of the first private companies to make vaccines in the country. We started making anti-syrup products. They treat people who are victims of snake bites. We were pioneers in anti-TB drugs and so on and so forth. And in the 60s and 70s, we started entering the formulations business in a fairly substantial way, I think. But the 80s, really, the entire pharma industry landscape in the country changed substantially. It became what was known to be sort of the golden era for the pharmaceutical industry. And at that point, the then emerging companies, such as Dr. Reddy's Labs and Sun Pharmaceuticals, they found a business model where they found a way to make innovative products, at a fraction of the cost. So they backward integrated, started making APIs, which are the active pharmaceutical ingredients that go into formulations. And they created both a development and manufacturing engine that continuously churned out these innovative products in a really rapid time. And that became the success of the pharma industry model, at least in the way that we understand it today. Our company seemed to have passed all of those opportunities by in the 80s and 90s. I think at a period where the industry was making these huge investments, we, for a variety of reasons, became extremely risk averse and chose instead to try and diversify into areas that weren't necessarily related to our core business. And I think what made matters worse is by the mid-90s, the entire industry was facing significant challenges because India had signed up to the TRIPS protocol, which in layman terms meant that we could no longer violate patents, and we had to wait until the innovative patents came off patents before we could launch those products. So the entire industry's model was based on this, and they had to rethink about their own survival and growth strategies. In a sense, it was the best thing that happened to the country because some of the biggest innovation you see happening in the industry is happening as a result of that came out of that necessity. So you can imagine for our company, not only did we pass all of the golden opportunities in the 80s, did not make substantial investments in that core business, but we were then at the end of the 90s also having to face the fact that we couldn't use that as a catch-up model to the rest. That's around the time I finished studying and came back with absolutely zero intentions of joining the family business. Like anybody who studies business, I suppose McKinsey type consulting jobs and investment banking is sort of the thing that you're drawn to. I was as well in some ways, and at that point you have notions of being slightly socialistic in your approach to solve the world's problems. you don't quite see business as an avenue to do that. To cut a long story short, I was very lucky that my father around the same time had decided to embark on a restructuring exercise in the company because he realized we were, had our hands in many different pies. We weren't big enough, didn't have the scale enough to really do justice to either of them. So I think the company was really at a crossroads. And luckily, he chose McKinsey to do this. So I said, you know what, this is going to look great on my resume. Could I stay for, the 4 to 6 months that this exercise is going to take so I could put it on my resume? And that's the best thing that I ever did in life because it gave me an opportunity to really understand the business. At the end of this exercise, to cut a long story short, there were 1 or 2 opportunities that we said we were really going to go after, and vaccines was one of them. To digress a bit, I suppose I always wanted to find a way to be part of something that helped reduce inequities in the world. And vaccines does exactly that. Access to primary healthcare, like access to education, are some of the reasons that there are so many inequities. So I was hooked. It was easy to be seduced by the notion of investing in vaccines. But don't get me wrong, we didn't decide on making those investments for altruistic reasons. There was a solid business case to do that. So around that time, we decided to take on, raise capital, and being a family-run business, family-owned business, who didn't take outside capital for 4 decades before that, it was a huge step. And initially, we decided to do this by raising equity, which is again a big step. But at that point, biotech was not a buzzword. Vaccines have very long gestation period, both for development and manufacturing. And we ended up talking to, like ISB oil and gas team to try to explain it because there were very few credible institutional investors even looking to back biotech investments. So we ended up funding this entire plan through debt, which was again, a huge leap of faith. The family went, as they say in poker, even though I don't play it all in, but I understand the notion. And so we decided to do that around 2003. And at that point, vaccines contributed to about 5 to 8% of our business. But it was a business that we had grown in number, in volume, and learned a lot in the process simply because of India's birth cohort that grew so exponentially. So anything we were making, we needed to make 100 million doses of. And in the process, we, I think, by default became experts at process development of some of these biotech processes. So around 2003, we had to do several things in terms of catching up to become relevant in the vaccine space. And we did this through partnerships. We tied up to academia in several countries. We in-licensed technologies. We partnered with Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore because our goal was to make a 5-in-1 vaccine. Till that point, essentially, you would all know, everyone who has kids at least would know, that Indian government, as most governments, would provide basic vaccines, and the vaccine of choice was a 3-in-1. So the goal with the 5-in-1 vaccine was twofold. One, you reduce the administration costs, which are a substantial part of reach. So instead of giving, 5 shots, you give 1 shot. But more importantly, you cover kids against 2 other important diseases, hepatitis B and H. influenza type B. So in about 8 years' time, we set up the infrastructure to be able to not just develop but manufacture these vaccines at a very large scale because birth cohorts of countries tend to be quite large globally. And then we set up infrastructure that was able to conform to WHO pre-qualification requirements. And why that was important is vaccine procurement happens through large agencies such as UNICEF. It happens through large government tenders, as the Ministry of Health does in our own country, for example, or the Pan American Health Organization for Latin America. So we needed to learn many things in a very short period of time to be able to take advantage of our core capabilities. Around 2013, we were approached by the Gates Foundation. And as many of you know, the Gates Foundation is a huge donor in both the fields of healthcare and education. And they came and said, we have a problem. We have countries that are not adopting HIP vaccine because it's too expensive. And as donors, we're putting money out there and saying, well, we'll subsidize you, take the vaccine, please, introduce it. You know, in India, there's 300,000 children dying of that. Please find a way to introduce it and we'll subsidize you, we'll give you money for it. But countries were still unconvinced because they said, well, you give the money now, but the subsidy won't last forever. And 5 years down the line, we can't introduce something and then take it away from our kids. So we said, well, we're happy to provide you an opportunity to be able to lower prices. And in return, we came up with a really unique public-private partnership model, which is now, quite an example in that space, where they give us predictability of revenues, because we said, one of our problems and biggest risks is this is tender-based, it's binary, so can we do something? So to cut a long story short, in partnership with both UNICEF and the Gates Foundation, we lowered the prices of the pentavalent vaccine such that today there's no country left on the planet that has not introduced HIP vaccine. And so it feels incredible, by the way, that in doing this, we also grew vaccines to contribute to today almost 90% of our revenues. And that's not because our pharma business degrew, it's because the vaccines business grew so much. Going forward, I think we're again at a crossroads in our sort of destiny, because there are new sets of challenges that are being presented. I think the API story, the generic story is done. Between pricing pressures and China controlling 96% of the API supply to Indian formulation manufacturers, we have our challenges cut out for us. So again, we're at that place where we're thinking about reinventing ourselves beyond vaccines. And we've chosen two specific areas just as food for thought for the rest of you. I think because of what's happening with synthetic biology, artificial intelligence, and the tools such as machine learning, aiding sort of innovations in how quickly you could do things like strain development, which conventionally you would have to do old school way, and now you have different tools available that would just help you do that faster. Personalized medicines, because a lot of the generic medicines really work completely differently in different populations. So there's tons of opportunities because of these new technologies and tools that are becoming available. I mean, everyone knows about synthetic milk. They've now produced rose oil, saffron, I'm told, can be produced synthetically as well. So the possibilities are sort of endless. So we're choosing to make a substantial part of our future investments in that area. It's as scary as it was for me in 2000, but it's also such a huge opportunity. I think the challenge for us is to learn about those technologies as quickly as possible. And the other area, obviously, is complex injectables, where I think in everything we've chosen, it's not necessarily been the easy path, sometimes because of default, because all the easy paths were taken, but because we've created an engine to, or an environment where it's complex, we work well in that environment, where the technical barriers are high, we work well in that environment. So we're trying to marry some of what we think are our capabilities to the opportunities that are going to be out there. So I think I'll just pause there. And again, thanks so much. It's so great to be here.
Thank you, Mahima. It's really exciting. Are there any investment opportunities for us? No, with your company. So maybe today, at least for the time that I spent here, maybe I'll find some investment opportunities. Good. Thank you. It's really exciting. You already shared quite a few things. We have about now 15-20 minutes time. We'll leave it to the audience to ask the questions rather than me asking again. Will probably repetition of a lot of things that we said. Murali is ex-TiE president.
Jalaj, it's a question for you. You said that. The question is for you. Hi, as Srini said, I'm Murli. You said you took the company from 1,000 crores to 100,000 crores. That's a very incredible number. 110,000. So, could you please tell how you did it? I mean, the challenges, or I mean, that's not a small number by any stretch of means. So, yeah, especially my friend in the back, he wants to do it. So.
I think there are many different things, and I don't like to use the word I did it in any way, because I think there is a organization, there's a big team that work together. I think it's a set of things that come together, and as I was saying earlier, as long as you are committed to the medium and long term and you invest, whether it's production, whether it's marketing, whether it's people, whether it's technology, then I think you have sustained growth. There are a lot of challenges on the way. I think one thing that paint industry offers is it's one of these unique industries that has grown at double digit for 15 plus years. That means that not only us, but many of our competitors would have also grown at that kind of rate, which again is very healthy. That's one thing. Second is, I think the margins have been reasonably good, and the payment terms of the industry, and I think some of the credit goes back to Asian Paints, which has been the market leader for many years. So there is very little credit that is offered in the marketplace today. And we as an organization serve almost 50,000 retailers directly. There are no intermediaries, there are no distributors. So the organization has a very good understanding of which products are moving, how much inventory to carry, if there are certain sharp practices that the competitors are resorting to, you come to know about these things fairly fast. Another thing that I think stands out, as I referred to earlier also, is it's very difficult to really say which part of the organization, which function of the organization is cutting edge or strong. Some would say it's production or distribution, some would say it's sales, demand generation, marketing, others would say information technology or paint technology or HR or finance and control function. So across all parts of the organization, investments have been made and the best people have been recruited to push the envelope continually to go to the next level. If you are a marketing-led organization, or if you are a technology-led organization, or if you are a finance-led organization, then you will make compromises. I think somebody needs to be in the driver's seat, and the organization has a certain need at that stage in its growth trajectory, and accordingly those business decisions need to be taken. That's the only way to keep on going to the next exponential growth curve. Otherwise you will always suffer, and the rest of the organization, the functional people, will get crowded out and say, in this organization there is no room for me. So the best idea can come from any function, best idea can come from people who are joining from campus all the way to the top leadership. And the number of levels in the organization are also from shop floor or from the people who are serving the customers at the dealer shelf all the way to the CEO are only 9. So it's again an organization which has always emphasized that we need to be lean. I said this earlier, you got to keep the customer at the center of everything that you do. If you lose that, again, you will always have a good reason not to serve a customer, but if you don't serve a customer, somebody else will. So you won't shortchange them on credit or pricing or quality. But outside of that, I think it's your obligation. Doesn't matter which part of the organization you are, you will serve the customer. So I'll just stop here.
Good evening, friends. I am Raghu Babu here. Again, question to Jalaj. I mean, your company represents the consumer sentiment in India. I mean, you work with the Indian consumer very, very closely. across the length and breadth of India. I mean, nobody knows better than you, the Indian consumer, either rural or urban consumer. I think next Indian growth has to come from the consumption story. I mean, the $1 trillion and all that. I mean, do you think, the Asian Paint story can be replicated in any other industry? And do you have, can you throw a little more on the consumption side? What are the opportunities for the startups and emerging companies? And can we take away some of the success stories you have done in the Asian Paints to any other industry which you think will work better? Thank you.
What I would say is, we heard it from Srini also earlier, and he gave another example in the beverage space. I think there are many such organizations in India today that are scaling up at very healthy rates because they have their fingers on the pulse of what the customer needs. And what happens many times is we have a lot of clutter or noise when we listen to the customer. We also have our own biases. When you actually go and sit with the customer and listen to what is it that's really important to them, rest of it is all noise. So I want a paint product that is whiter, I want a paint product that is smoother, I want a paint product that has antifungal properties, I want a paint product that lasts for 5 years. That's what some of us want. If you really go and listen to the customer, they'll actually tell you what it is. And if you have a humility to listen to that, I think there are many opportunities for organizations to offer products and services and scale up. One sector that I believe that has a lot of growth is the whole leisure space. I think more and more Indians, as they become affluent, I think there's a lot of talk of healthcare we discuss, medical tourism we discuss about people going outside of India and spending money. But actually within India, if you see the amount of money that we all spend, the free time that we have and what we do with our free time, a lot of it goes in consumption of data on our gadgets. But whether it's exercise, whether it's better eating, whether it's better clothing, whether it's in our homes, the kind of things we like to do ourselves, personal trainers, personal improvement plans on many things. I think people are spending a lot more on themselves than they have done. And there is no guilt. I think the generation that grew up before us, there was a sense of sacrifice, there was a sense of giving back. I'm not saying it's not there today, because actually the younger people who joined the company are much more active in the CSR space than I would say even many of us. But the whole space of consumption story in India, so it's not one toothpaste. Every family member has a different toothpaste, toothbrush, and all, and we have seen that in the FMCG space. So that individuality that comes out in everything that we do, and who is it that makes the consumption decision? Is it the male member? Is it the lady of the house? Is it the children of the house? Is it the grandparents of the house? For each of the consumption items, whether it's a product or service, is very different. If you really go and study some of these things, I think there are great opportunities. Number of shoes or footwear that people have today versus what they had a few years ago, and how fast they are changing those things. I just think you will find many business models of things, even used items, how what you use you want to give it out and get something else. So I would think in the consumer space, I agree with you, and it doesn't really matter whether you are in urban context, in not so good neighborhoods, or even in rural context. There are very affluent customers today. So if you have the right business model, if you have the right business idea, I think there are lots of people who are willing to pay that extra money to buy products. And again, I believe more and more free time people will value, but the way they spend that free time on products and services, I think is a great opportunity.
this question is from Mr. Jalaj. Good evening, sir. Good evening to all. So it's very nice hearing your success story from how you built your company from and we, all of you built the company from 1,000 crores to I think 1,10,000 crores now. So coming down to the same question here is, you've gone on a lean idea of not giving credit, especially in the consumer market of construction and paints, etc. I would like to know, like a prerequisite before you entered with 1,000 crore, there was always a problem of a credit or a non-credit. I just want to know, how did you go with the lean of not giving credit in this kind of a market, Indian market? Because we face the same problem. So I would just like to know, like, without credit, how did you plunge into the market and make people actually get used to it? Is it because of the company that was already established? Or if we have a new company, how do you think is the right way to approach it?
Every new geography that we go to, people say, oh, this works in India, but it will not work here. If you don't set the principles right on day one, after you become a leader, you can't reset the rules, because it's the same rules that got you there, and if you start tweaking the rules, it's going to antagonize the same set of customers. So my sincere advice is, don't think that few years down the line you can change this. If you want to take those tough decisions, take them head on day one, whether it's an accounting principle, whether it's what you want to offer in your product, what you want to do about your compliance and environment policy, people policy, doesn't matter what it is. This was a principle that was signed off much more before I got involved in this company. The way the paint industry used to work is, most of the painting used to happen during Diwali, Dasra, Pola, whichever one of these festivals around the country were. And there used to be 8 to 9 months of credit that used to be given, because the next year the season will come up is when the product will be required, and that's when the retailer will pay. So what had happened is, there were, as Srini said earlier, there were 3-4 established multinational players in India who would never visit the market, offer the credit, and be very happy that the sale would happen. Now here was a set of entrepreneurs who just didn't have the balance sheet to extend that kind of credit. So they would say, we will give you credit, we will give you products whenever you want. So we will offer you the best service in the marketplace. Why do you need credit? Because I dump material to you, and then I give you so much more than you need. So there is indigestion. But I tell you, don't pay me now. Whenever you sell your product, you pay me. So you are also okay. Your dealer shelf is occupied, but outside of that, you don't really mind. Versus a company that is saying, I'll only give you what you want for the next 1 week or 1 month. And as soon as you sell that product, you'll pay me. Now the way you will sell the product is, I will work with the painting contractor, I will work with real estate developers, I will work with interior decorators, I will do ads on television. So consumers will come and ask for the product. Now if you can work with that kind of a business model, and that kind of business model worked for us for the decorative business, but for the industrial business it never worked, because there are other competitors who are willing to give 90 and 120 days credit. So we said we will stay away from that business till the business practice changed. When we went to the Egyptian market in 2002, they had 180-day credit, and today it's about 16 to 18 days. So the day we entered the market, we said, this is how we will do this. Now it can be a big risk also, because somebody will say, this works in your home market, it will never work here. But you have to do things right for the dealers, so the material moves. That has to be your emphasis. And the dealer will pay you when they want to order your material again. If that cycle is shortened by your sales and marketing team, by your technology team, by your business development initiatives, then the customer will come back and pay you because they want the next consignment. So that's how that credit cycle was crashed. It was not anything else.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I think Mr. Jalaj, we'll let you rest. This is also TiE ISB, so we'll engage.
Thank you.
Professor, you were talking about innovation coming through pain point, recognizing a pain point. I think what I'm seeing now, the new economy, is beyond this. There is no pain point. Facebook, for example. There is no pain point when Facebook was started, but it became a pain point. That's a different thing. So I think the new economy, the next trillion, probably will also be contributed from innovation that comes not just from pain points, but beyond pain points. What do you say about that? Your take on it?
Well, if we look at the market, it's evolving. And so, yes, companies like Facebook create, in my opinion, they create new pain points. How do we manage so much information? How do we manage all these connections? But I will still maintain, many of the things that have already been said by the panelists. There are opportunities that you need to recognize. You still need to go after scale. I like to talk about three metrics, and I now would, after listening to Mahima, I'll add a fourth metric to it. And it's very simple. Call them CEO metrics. C stands for customer, that Jalaj has been talking about. And if you don't pay attention to the customer, he said something that others have also said before, that the only person that really matters is the customer whose check has not bounced. Right? So you have to worry about the customer, what they want. It becomes important to define who's the customer. Now, in the context of Asian Paints, is it the distributor, or is it going to be the consumer or the user down the line, the property owner? So you have to understand really, who the customer is, but the C part is very important. And you have to, in my opinion, you have to understand it. If you're serving the market in India, you have to look at what the Indian customer wants before you start worrying about the US customer and so on. I remember several years ago, one of my friends from the US who came back to India, Vinita Bali, she was heading up Britannia. And she was talking about biscuits that they were making. They had identified that in India, 30% of the population was either diabetic or pre-diabetic. So this is Mahima, your company has done very well by doing good. So that was the societal benefit that I was going to add. But, so, the idea was, well, can we develop, for example, Britannia is a biscuit company, can we develop biscuits that are healthy, high fiber, etc., that taste good? So they worked, and it's very hard to find things that taste good that are healthy. So they spent 2 years, working on it in the lab. They finally came up with something. So I said, did it work? She said, no. I said, why, what happened? She said, what we forgot is that when Indians drink tea, when Indians have biscuit, they usually dip them in tea. So this biscuit that they had designed wasn't tea resistant. Okay, so then they had to go back to the drawing board to come up with a biscuit that tasted good, that had high fiber, this, that, and the other, that was dippable in the tea. You don't have the dippable criteria if you're looking at, let's say, the US market. So what I'm trying to just understand, what is it the customer wants. More and more importantly, if I look at India and I look at the scaling up opportunities, and it's happening because a fairly large proportion every year moves into the middle class. And so the consumer markets are kind of exploding. Now, how do you keep up with growth without growing your employee base and increasing the competence? So it's not just customer satisfaction, customer retention. It is also in India a game of employee retention, employee engagement. So these are some of the employee metrics. O stands for owner. Okay, that's fine. We're looking at shareholder returns and so on. But what we need in India, and that's one of the things I didn't mention, what I'm very proud of our alumni for, is probably one of the most entrepreneurial schools in India. About 450 companies have been started by ISB alums. All right? So what is needed is societal benefits also. So that's when we were talking about vaccines. If you can do well while you're doing good, that's fantastic. So the sort of CEO, I'm making it to CEOs. But I didn't really, you asked me one question, I gave you another answer. So that's what we academics do sometimes.
Hi, I just had a quick question for Ms. Datla. Hi, this is hi. And when you talked about using artificial intelligence and machine learning, to start producing new kinds of molecules and new kinds of medicines, and I just wanted to ask you, from your perspective, how do you feel governments and regulatory bodies need to sort of shape up to this new challenge? And the reason I bring this up is because a while ago, genetically modified foods had come onto the markets, and governments were completely set against it, and many governments in Europe just simply said, we will never allow this. And this was food made in the lab. And when you start using artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies to simulate this kind of an environment, you're quite literally pushing the envelope of the kind of technologies which are available today. So do you feel that the world is ready for this kind of innovation? And what do you think governments and like I said, regulatory bodies need to do? What are the dangers associated with this? And how we can possibly support this industry and sort of help this technology see the light of day?
Well, it's a complicated question to answer because, in a lot of these areas where there are new technologies, regulation will take a long time to catch up, and I think all governments, including US, India, they're all going to struggle with trying to come up with a framework to regulate, right? A lot of the industry growth happened because there was no regulation, like Uber, no regulation, software industry, no regulation. So in a sense, there's already line of sight to this, so it's going to be a difficult balancing act. If you take the example of GMOs, even India, there's so much political sensitivity. But personally, I don't think people will have a choice. If you want to solve food problems, if you really think malnutrition and lack of food and resources are going to be an issue, which they are, because again, I personally believe climate change is real, governments are not going to be able to put their head in the sand much longer. And speaking about GMOs, coincidentally, technically one of our vaccine products is genetically modified virus, and you can apply it to simulate just enough disease to protect. And despite their attitude towards using these technologies in food, because I do recognize that they ought to be safety concerns. There's some of them that are really legitimate. They've embraced them in the case of health, both India and abroad. So I think they're just going to have to be pushed to the extent where when that other problem, such as hunger, becomes big enough that becomes the political issue, and not the fact that it's a GMO. And a lot of these technologies will push things or push solutions that are so huge that governments will have to embrace it. Look at synthetic biology. The reason it's so hot today was because in the United States they said, we want non-petroleum based products because we don't want this reliance on petroleum, not just because prices fluctuate, but because it's linked to political actions in the world, and countries have positions, very deep positions on these things. But they made such substantial investments to solve, sort of that problem. They didn't care that it was going to be, manipulating nature. But a lot of things that we consume today are a result of that. And I think it's great that we have the ability and the tools to understand that, unravel those mysteries, and find solutions that, for challenges that our generations and future generations will face. So yeah, the regulation will take time, but it will happen because they won't have choice in the matter.
Thank you. Now we got to end this session that we're already eaten into 5 minutes of the next session. So, sorry? No, it's 6:35. So the president is saying that he can extend by another 5 minutes. Last question, please. We want to give it to some lady sitting somewhere because.
Hello. Here.
Yes.
It's wonderful to hear 4 journeys today here. I just have one question for you all. So all the 4 journeys seem to be very asset heavy models. why is there a lot of interest from the venture capital community here to see asset light models for the next set of startups to grow?
I'll give it to you. See, the venture capital, it's basically a greedy business, isn't it? It's not. We're not there yet. When these companies go bankrupt, that's when we buy them. So now just to share with you that, traditionally these venture capital and all that set up for being very high growth, high return models. There's also a reason sometimes a lot of them, they go so fast that, they cannot, keep up with the markets and all of them, they fall. The basic issue in smaller things, when to fund the very light things and all of them is, how do you give them the money back? If you find a mechanism, you say, okay, I'm taking money from you in 5 years, 10 years, this is how I give the money back. There's a lot of money out there. Money is not an issue there. They're asking this question being that, how does the money goes back? If you can answer that question convincingly, then anything is possible. Now I'll give it to Raj too.
So, this is something I've been struggling with for 3 decades. I undoubtedly have a few accounting friends in the audience, and they won't be friends after this. And the problem is that our definition of assets is totally wrong. The asset definition is based on what the DuPont company decided in 1917, and we have something called the DuPont model, and that's property, plant, and equipment. So what's the asset for ISB? It's human capital, it's intellectual property. If you look at the market value to book value ratio, the book value is the assets as defined by the accounting community. That ratio is running at about 4 to 1, 5 to 1, which means that 75 to 80% of the value of the companies is not on the books. Okay, and what is that value? It's brand value, it's distribution relationships, it's all kinds of things that are not recorded. So, you're not necessarily, your asset light as defined by property, plant, and equipment. You're not asset light when it comes to things like intellectual property, things like customer relationships. Those are also assets, and so let me just stop out there. And that's what you really have to think. When you're starting a company, are you creating assets that give you a competitive advantage? And your asset could be your distribution network.
All right, thank you very much. And it's been very learning to me also, Jalaj and Mahima, for sharing your very successful story. Thank you.
So much, sir. This was an amazing panel. Would request all of you to be there for a few minutes, please. It was great insights. Thank you so much. Now, I would request TiE Hyderabad board member and managing director of Controllers, Sridhar Pinapreddy Garu, to please give away small memento to Srini Raju Garu. To Jalaj sir also, sir. Now I would request Dr. Deepanvita, TiE Hyderabad board member and CEO of IKP, to please do the honors to Mahima Datla garu. Then I would request our TiE Hyderabad president and Great Four Systems CEO Pradeep Mittalji to give a small memento to our very own Dean Sir Srivastavji. Kodak moment.